Hello everyone, good day to you and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to do serialization in NestJs the proper way. What is serialization? Serialization talks about the process you do just before your server returns data to the client. So when a request is made from the client and the server has taken the request and handle it, just before it returns the data, you might want to do some pre-processing on the data retrieved from the database before showing it to the client. Let me give you a concrete example. For now, I'm going to be focusing on my screen here. So do not be alarmed when you see me looking up. That's where my screen is. So I have the NestJs service set up. Swagger is already set up, and I'm using Prisma as my URM. You can see we have two models defined here, user and user profile. What I want to show you is this. I have a controller here, rather a user controller opened up here, user controller. And you can see we have a single handler defined here, find many users. And when you go into the find many method of the user service, you can see we're just querying Prisma, the database via Prisma to return all the user. And so when we go to not Postman, to Swagger, and just refresh, you can see we have a single URL or API endpoint. And then when I hit execute, we can see many users, but what I want you to notice here is in this data returned, we have the raw user objects from the database. You can see we have the password being shown here. We have fields like refresh token, created and updated that. And normally you would want to hide all this data from the client. So what I'm going to do right now is to build a serializer that would ensure that when this data is being returned, all these sensitive fields will be hidden. One way to go about it is probably write an imperative code that would use object.keys to loop through the whole data and then delete all the keys. But we're not going to take that approach here. We're going to take a more elegant approach. And this approach involves using an interceptor, using a proper package class transformer, and also creating entity classes. When you use this approach, you get two benefits. The first one is your code is going to be more declarative. And secondly, if you use entity classes the right way, you get to have Swagger well documented. So at the end of this, you will see that the entity classes will be here. And when you have a very documented Swagger or Open API specification, your client can consume this Swagger document to generate necessary use query hooks for making calls. But the focus of this video is serialization. So at the end of this, we are going to see that these sensitive fields will be hidden from the response. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a user entity class. It's defined here. And then I'm going to target all the fields I do not want to show and mark them with exclude. You can see I've already done that for the password and the refresh token. Now I also want to exclude the update header and the create header. Exclude is imported from class transformer. The next thing you want to do is create a method, or rather a static method that you would use to operate on many users. So for instance, let's find many returns an array of users. So how do you transform each record in this array to eliminate the sensitive field? So I'll do that by defining a static method in my user entity, static many, and this would accept a data, which I'll call users, And this would be an array of user entity. And then array of user entity, this would map through it, return users dot map. And for each of the user, we are going to call, yes, for each of these, we're going to do new user entity of users, of user, right? So by doing this, we are whipping through the user's return. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to locate the user controller here. And rather than returning this straight from the service, we can bind it to a variable called result and do this. Return new, or rather, since it's a static method, user entity dot many and result. You might think that this is sufficient to do the transformation, but not quite. So as you can see, I'll refresh this and I'll try to make the same endpoint, hit the same endpoint, try it out. You can see that the password and the refresh token and the created and updated that is still showing. But here is the final piece of the puzzle. So you would want to set up something called class serializer interceptor, which would take this user entity instance being returned and then would read this decorators and decide on automatically remove all fields that have been marked exclude by this decorator. So I'm going to register this class serializer interceptor at the global level for NestJs. I'm doing this using a concept of plug. So if you go to your main.ts, normally you would want to do something like this: const app dot use global, if I can spell global, use global interceptors, and then passing the class serializer interceptor. But I have a more elegant way of doing it here. I'm using a concept called plugs. So plugs are more like functions that you would call to configure your app. So when I go into my plug module, for example, you can see we have Swagger plug. We just sets up the Swagger. So I also have another plug called Nest Global Provider plug. So I am going to configure this app with a class serializer interceptor. And this is done this way. This is imported from NestJs common, so you can see here. And so by doing this, and then using this plug inside the main.ts, so you can see this plug has been configured here. By doing this, what this does, it takes the return value, the user entity return here, and maps through it using this static method. And then the class serializer interceptor, just before it returns to the client, goes through the instance, and for all the field that has been marked as excluded, it removes it. So now, when we hit the endpoint again, watch what happens. Voila, you can see that we no longer have the refresh token, nor the updated at, nor the password showing here. And that's it. That's one step. But however, what would happen if you, for instance, you can see that in my Prisma file, you can see that there is a one-to-many relationship between the user and user profile. So there might be an instance in which you would want to return a profile object also in the user class. So let's go and do that. So inside this find menu, I can just do this. I can add a filter that says select. Oh, sorry, my bad, got it wrong. So I can add a filter that says select and then the profile to be true. So now, watch what happens here. I think everything is Okay, yes. So for now, it's complaining result. The user entity is saying it's erroring out because for now the user entity does not have the profile field defined. So let me just comment this out and just return result. So when we go to the Swagger and execute, you can see that we have the profile showing up as well. We have the profile showing up. Of course, we wanted to include the profile, not just select it because include. Yep. So profile should show up alongside the user information. So let's say that I don't want to show the created and updated ad in this nested profile field. How do we do that? So we can do this by creating a profile entity. So I'm going to create a new profile entity, user profile entity.ts, and then we're going to take cue from the user entity. So first of all, I'm going to export class user profile entity, and then it's going to implement user profile, which comes from the Prisma. So user profile implements user profile, and we can import it from Prisma by doing control space. Sometimes I don't know why it doesn't work for me, but no harm done. You can just copy it from here. Yep. Prisma client. Right. Let me close this. Prisma client and user profile. Copy it from here. All right. So we'll use TypeScript to fix this. Implement user profile. So as you can see, we have all the fields defined in the user profile model. And then what do we want to exclude? We use class transformer to exclude this. And also we can use an API hide property to tell Swagger that we do not want to show this created ad in the documentation. So we have done this, and just to be true to what we did before the user entity, we are going to create a constructor which does the main work. Constructor, and make it data, and then partial user profile entity or null. Yep. And then this constructor, what does it do if the data is not equal to null? We are going to objects.assign this to the data. And then just for completeness sake, we can also instantiate the mini static method. So this is going to be user profile entity. And this is going to be user profile. And this is going to be user profile. And this is going to be user profile entity. So right now we have created a serializer to serialize the user profile, but then we want to use this serializer inside the user such that by calling the user entity in the controller, we also get the user data serialized as well as the user profile. So what we are going to do is add a profile field here and tag it with user profile entity. Next thing we are going to do is we're going to take advantage of the class transformer class type, and tell class transformer, we want you to return user profile entity for this field. So that's what we're going to do here. We're also going to mark it as null, as nullable, because we might want to have a query in which we do not select user profile. So now that's out of the way. Something is going to change here because profile is not actually a field in the user schema, but more like a related table. We have to separate it from the user entity and destructure it here. And then we're going to write a clause that goes like this. If we have a profile, then what we're going to do is we're going to do this dot profile would be equal to the new user profile entity of profile. So by doing this, we can go back to the controller and comment in this and this and comment out this and watch what happens when we go to the Swagger. When I execute this, you can see we no longer have the created ad and updated ad showing in this user profile. So that's it, guys. To recap, all you just need to do is create various user entity class and then make sure you set up the global interceptor, a class serialized interceptor, which intercepts the user entity, and using the exclude annotation from class transformer, it removes the field that has been marked as excluded from the data that is going to be returned to the client. That's it, guys. Thank you.